New details about the charges against the former in-house lawyer for the Thunder Bay Police Service. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. A day after it was announced that the OPP have laid obstruction and breach of trust charges against former Thunder Bay Police lawyer Holly Walbourne, the case was addressed for the first time in court.
Court documents, first made public by Willow Fiddler, the Globe and Mail, provide more detail about the allegations. Walbourne is accused of deceiving members of the Thunder Bay Police Services Board in October of 2021 by making false or misleading statements or omitting key details that obstructed the board from doing its duty. She's also accused of lying to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission and its external counsel between October of 2021 and June of 2022. Finally, she's charged with deceiving members of the Toronto Police Service between January and November of 2022. Walbourne faces 5 charges in all, 3 counts of obstruction of justice, obstruction of a public or peace officer, and breach of trust. Walbourne resigned from her role with the police service last April. She's the second person charged in an ongoing misconduct investigation against members of the service. Staff Sergeant Michael Dimony was also charged with obstruction of justice, 2 counts of assault, and breach of trust back in December.
A big conservatory decision is coming for City Council on Monday.
There's a recommendation to approve Phase 2 of the renewal work on the facility. That comes with a $7.8 million price tag. Josh Morano has the details.
It's the next step for the Centennial Conservatory's renewal. Phase 1 took place over a year, which saw the demolition of the back greenhouses and construction of a new one, with Phase 2 set to be presented to Council this coming Monday, though the plans have slightly changed. The new price tag, $7.8 million, up from the original $5.1 million the Conservatory budgeted for the phase. Manager of Parks and Outdoor Services, Corey Halverson, says they were successful early on, receiving $3.7 million from external funds, with the money partly funding the first 2 phases, with the rest coming from some form of capital.
We're feeling the impacts of various reasons for increased prices right now, whether it's supply and demand for either materials or contracting services. There's some specialized components to the project, including the glazing that may have been driving up some of the costs too. So we will be outlining all of that in both a report and a presentation to Council Monday evening.
The glazing envelope that Halverson refers to involves trading in single-pane glass for insulated multi-wall acrylic panels, with the intent being that it won't require the whitewashing that is currently on the facility now. Halverson adds Phase 2 will tackle everything that the public has been anticipating.
Once this project is up and running, I'll be able to then focus in on the plans for programming and operations going forward. That is expected to bring opportunities for sources of revenue for use of the facility, whether it's the multi-purpose room for bookings, for events, allowing people access back into there and booking those for a fee.
While Halverson adds there are plans for Phase 3 that will focus on a facelift for the parking lot and green spaces, starting construction on Phase 2 is top priority, and the sooner they get started, the better, for completion in spring or summer of 2025. Josh Morano, TBT News.
Amid a slew of pre-budget announcements from the Liberals, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is demanding a tax on excess grocery profits. He spoke to TBT News.
Can't pay my bills, put gas in the car, and buy my groceries. But the oil and gas companies are making a record profit. The corporate grocery stores are making a record profit. That just doesn't sit well with people. And I'm not talking high profits. I'm not talking extremely good profits. They're literally making record profits.
Singh spoke with TBT News today. He says Canada's largest grocery chains are in his sights. He wants the government to implement a new corporate tax based on profit levels. He believes it's a way to discourage grocers from gouging the public.
Well, these type of practices have happened in Canada. It's not unlikely that they're again engaging in some sort of abuse of their dominant market share, and Canadians are paying the price. The Conservatives let them off the hook before. The Liberals continue to let them off the hook. We're pushing back, and what this would mean for Northern is lower prices, more competition, more fairness, and your families will be able to afford the food you need.
Singh says the revenue generated by his excess profit tax could be reinvested into affordability measures like a GST rebate or food security funding. But NDP members can't put a tax increase through themselves, and Singh says he hasn't been able to get the Liberals on board.
A train derailment in the Thunder Bay district is under investigation. It happened in Huronian, east of Atikokan. According to CN Rail, 8 cars transporting grain came off the tracks. Track repairs are underway and are expected to be finished by Monday morning. There were no injuries and no dangerous goods were involved in the derailment.
New and inexperienced truck drivers are more likely to get into accidents according to the Insurance Bureau of Canada.
The Bureau and other safety advocates argue there's an urgent need for better driver training. Lee Noonan explains.
The national rate of transport collisions appears to be climbing, with the number of insurance claims for commercial vehicle accidents increasing faster than the increase in the number of vehicles on the road. That comes from a recent report by the Insurance Bureau of Canada, who say drivers under 25 or with less than 3 years' experience tend to have more frequent and more serious collisions.
You see it in Northern Ontario, and we see it across the country, how many collisions are involving commercial vehicles. And we're supposed to be the professionals on the highway, right? We're supposed to be the ones that can avoid these collisions, anticipate that it could happen.
Travis McDougall, co-founder of Truckers for Safer Highways, says the report confirms what they've been saying. According to the report, accidents tend to be more serious in rural areas and during the winter. McDougall says with many new drivers training on southern Ontario roads, driving in the north can be unforgiving.
You see a lot of multi-lane highways, which presents its own challenges, but you don't see the different terrains that we see in Northern Ontario, where you're suddenly climbing or so you're slowing down and then speeding up again. And then you don't see the sudden weather changes.
McDougall says the fact that highways are often the main road through small communities also adds to the challenges for new drivers, as does the lack of areas for stopping.
You leave Hearst, the weather's great. And before you get to Long Lac, you could be an hour into the drive. And before you get it to Long Lac, you're now in a blinding snowstorm. You can't see anything. You want to park. You don't feel comfortable because you're a fairly new driver, but there's nowhere to stop.
The Insurance Bureau is calling for better training with more oversight, graduated licensing for transport drivers, and increased enforcement. McDougall hopes the report will be enough to spur government action.
The common response from government right now is that Ontario has some of the safest highways in North America. And we certainly don't feel that way traveling on these highways. At this point, it's become almost an insult to hear it.
Lee Noonan, TBT News.
At Queen's Park today, the Ontario government announced a number of housing changes aimed to speed up development.
The legislation is titled the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act. CTV's Siobhan Morris has the details.
Called the Cutting Red Tape to Build More Homes Act, this bill includes dozens of changes.
Targeted measures to get more shovels in the ground faster
and build for less.
By letting homeowners and home builders decide the right number of parking spaces in new residential development near transit.
The government wants to eliminate barriers to building laneway and garden suites,
including maximum lot coverage and limits on the number of bedrooms allowed per lot.
Universities will get a new exemption from Planning Act rules. The focus is on building new student housing on any land owned or controlled by a publicly funded university.
Every new dorm that we build is an apartment that becomes available in the community. Our colleges have shown that they can handle it. Our universities need to be able to move as quickly as possible.
Other changes include a use it or lose it policy so municipalities can pull permits for stalled projects, restrictions on third-party appeals on development, a cleanup of development charge policies to boost revenue to cities, and a more transparent process for ministerial zoning orders that bypass planning rules. While the minister says this suite of moves is an important step, the opposition describes it quite another way.
This is a weak bill. It lacks ambition, it lacks boldness, and it lacks urgency.
It's just small changes and tinkering around the edges and more of the same flip-flops.
There's a feeling the bill doesn't meet the intensity of the housing crisis.
It's a raging forest fire that the government has brought a garden hose to try to deal with.
There are renewed calls to allow for up to 4 units on a single property as of right across Ontario.
Why should people who cannot afford a single-family home be priced out of neighbourhoods that they want to live in?
There's also a push to restore rent control.
That was CTV's Siobhan Morris reporting. And a surprise at the Ontario Legislature today, the provincial government announced its support for an NDP bill to call intimate partner violence an epidemic.
So we will be seeking that advice from the Standing Committee on Justice in the coming days as well. Thank you.
The announcement got a rare standing ovation from all parties in the House. Advocates have been calling for such a move for years, and this follows in the footsteps of more than 90 municipalities.
Spring has sprung, and for Thunder Bay, that usually means plenty of bumps in the road.
And while city crews have been hard at work filling potholes, they don't have as many to deal with this year, thanks to the mild winter. Jessica Clement has the story.
As the snow melts, it's the time of year many Thunder Bay residents start complaining about potholes. But with the warmer conditions the past few months, there aren't as many this year.
The less snow we get and ice on the roads during the winter, kind of the less issue it is in the spring when we see the melt and the freezing overnight. It's not as dramatic on the roads when we're seeing all those potholes forming. So it's been a good winter for us.
Ian Spoljarich, manager of roads, notes road crews and the Python 5000 have been out daily filling in as many potholes as they can. He says they had an advantage this spring, as the warmer weather allowed his crews to get a head start on improving the driving conditions in the city.
Not a lot of snow on the ground, so not a lot of plowing. So our staff were busy out, doing other things, and a lot of that work did involve filling potholes, which gave us a nice opportunity to take care of that. So then when the spring came, a lot of those holes were filled already, and you can see it on the roads now.
Crews are currently using a cold mix for pothole repairs, and will switch to a hot mix after the asphalt plants open around the May long weekend.
Cold mix is more of a temporary repair. It's made before the season starts, and then we use the hot mix asphalt as a permanent repair.
Spoljarich is hoping that crews can ramp up the rest of their work as more snow melts in the coming weeks. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
Well, to say that today's weather made me happy, I think is not unusual, as I'm typically a happy person, but it was so stunning today that I was even happier than usual. Fiona, that sunshine really helps.
Oh, it was beautiful, and it was mild. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too windy. It was just right. I feel like Goldilocks today. We started out with a low of -1. Winds were very light, just 3 kilometers per hour from the west for the most part in the morning, and then it increased in the afternoon ever so slightly up to 17 kilometers an hour from the northeast, and we topped out with a high of 13. Remember, at this time of year, we should be in the mid-single digits, so this is quite nice. Partly cloudy to start. We did see some increasing afternoon cloud cover. To the west, it's still very sunny in Fort Frances, and they're currently at their daytime high of 14, and very similar temperatures as you head to the north and to the east. Dryden and Kenora at 13, as is Uppsala. Atikokan currently 15. We've got 11 in Armstrong and Greenstone. A little bit more cloud as you head further north, but overnight temperatures were above the freezing mark to the north in the region. And Sault Ste. Marie, usually the hot spot in the region, it's kind of middle of the road right now. They're mostly cloudy at 10 Celsius, but they did top out with a high of 17 this afternoon. Now here in the city of Thunder Bay tonight, we are going to drop back down to the freezing mark, but it'll still be warm enough along the ground level of the region that we're not going to see it turn to wet snow or freezing rain. It's going to stay rainy if it falls. There's about a 40% chance of it, and that's because what's been moving through has been just little pockets of precipitation, and you can see it's still very uneven, this system that is moving through, and for the most part it has stayed to the south, but there is a good chance we will see it move up overnight tonight. So keep your umbrella handy for the home stretch into the weekend, because it's going to be a little bit off and on for tonight and tomorrow. But the good news is those mild temperatures in the low to mid-teens will continue. And as we kick off the weekend, it's going to be sunnier and drier heading into Friday and Saturday. So things are looking very good to set us into a nice calm start to the summer, but I know there's still a lot of concerns about what could be a nasty forest fire season. So don't want to hear any complaints about a little bit of rain right now, because every little bit of moisture is definitely going to help us.
Absolutely, yeah, we will take the moisture. However, I do have to say you close things out with a bang there, sunny and dry. I mean, that's speaking my language.
I do this just to make you happy.
But I understand we do have to get some of that precipitation as well, so that's not a bad thing. All right, let's turn our attention to national news now. It was the most high-profile day yet at the Foreign Interference Inquiry. That's because the Prime Minister answered questions, as did some of his cabinet ministers. We'll tell you what they said when your Wednesday News Hour continues after the break.
The intelligence services had shared with him concerns